As far as I'm concerned, you wasted a lot of your video talking about this why I don't reply kind of thing, because you know what? I do reply. I meant to reply to you. Anybody that watches me knows I mean to reply. I have an argument with the guy right now about engagement and the kinds of engagement that you sort of self-commit to. On the one hand, you're not committed to having any engagements. On the other hand, there are sort of intellectual obligations, maybe not as important as other concerns all the time, but all other things being equal. You know, I used your name, yes, it was meant for you to see. Okay, usually I reply to them. For all I know, you didn't accept it and it timed out or something. But okay, I forget those kinds of things, so probably I forgot it. But you wasted your time making a big deal out of that, because overall it's clear that is not a pattern that I exhibit just because of one case where, you know, I didn't get it, or we did not get it applied to your video. The other issue here is who calls themselves relativists. I've told you in that video my kind of relativism, which you didn't really seem to get, and I have tons of videos if you searched on relativism, okay? Not that you have to, but the point is I'm already established in not that kind of relativist you're talking about. Okay, I'm not interested in using as models of relativism people that have created this nihilistic philosophy where they try to exploit skepticism and relativism to argue that nothing really matters and there is nothing. No, see, a relativist cannot at all logically, it doesn't matter what the majority of people think. A relativist really using that term as an idea, as a concept, not just a name for whatever they want, group of people that calls themselves that. You know, they can't say there's no moral systems, really, because there's so many. There's infinite, so there's none. That's real logical. Listen, relativists say there's a lot of these. And also, it's right in the word, relating. Yeah, a lot of relativists, people that call themselves relativists, that is, you know, may not live up to this. But we fight over words for thousands of years in philosophy, and for good reason, because there's concepts associated. The terms, you know, relation, relate, relativism, relativity, these are all involved with the frame that is important to us actual relativists. And the people that just want to exploit it for their nihilistic arguments, well, that's bullshit, and I agree with you about nihilism. Nihilism is people that say, well, we don't believe anything, and they actually believe all their pet peeves, because you know what, their pet peeves is just as important as the general theory of relativity. Now, I also have a theory of materiality, okay, and it's a subjective one, not a relativistic one, and it's also, not an objective one, because it's a relativistic theory, okay? It's relativistic because you said, for example, we can share these things, we can disclose things, intersubjective, okay, I'm getting a little bit too excited about that. We can make intersubjective disclosures. And I agree. But that's not going to get you to objectivity, okay? It's not going to get you to objectivity. So the main issue here is that there's a couple things going on. One, for me to be thoroughly relativist simply means that, okay, yes, even an objectivist can realize that we only know about other things because of their relations to us primarily, but also we use their relations to us to make statements about the relations to each other. That's the only way we can know about other things. But a relativist that wants to say, I'm relativist down to the core, is adding to that. I don't believe that I can be understood except for in terms of my relation to other people. You know, we assume we understand ourselves as things in ourselves. Not me, I don't. I think we're perceiving about ourselves just like we're perceiving about the world. What we know about ourselves is based on what we perceive. And there's evidence that there's a lot going on we don't perceive because we perceive it indirectly in a way that shows us we're missing a perception that we might otherwise have more directly, this subjective kind of perception. Like we see that our brain is sending impulses to the heart to control it that we weren't really aware of. Ironically, once you become aware of it, you know, in this indirect way, you do have more direct access than you realize to some of those things. But hormonal, release and all kinds of things that turn out to be triggered by the brain, even that I don't know about, let alone the things that don't really go to the brain, like the, production of blood cells. I think there's two kinds of people really right now. There's a short-term kind of person and a long-term kind of person, and the short-term kind of person is looking for the quick turnaround, and the long-term person is looking for the long-term benefit. And basically, the short-term people run society. And we have war and all of these things. It's because they're running society. And when you see freedom slowly breaking out, slavery being beaten back, and so on, that's the long-term people making inroads. That's kind of what I believe. So which one of these groups gets a call on human nature? Which of their intersubjective experiences is more objective? If we can say, well, we're not going to get absolute objectivity, maybe you'll concede that, but we could get more, so there's this idea of this objectivity as a limiting point that we move towards. So which of those two is more? It would be the one that correlates more to the subjective perceptions of each scientist involved, each true studier, making experiments and turning experiences into ideas. So it's going to be subjectively justified, right, for that individual. And ultimately the fact that they have different subjective experiences means probably they'll have different interpretations. I'm fine with that because I'm just trying to be honest with my perceptions. And I don't need to get an intersubjective solace. However, I do believe that with the intersubjective solace, we begin to triangulate on a greater reality. So I do use that. And that's relativism. It's all how it relates to me in my experiences and whatnot. How things relate to each other. And it doesn't mean any of those things you're saying. Those are just a bunch of people that have called themselves relativists. I refuse to let them own that word when they're so incompetent with it. It just makes people like you think, oh, you have to be an objectivist to not be that way. Too bad that there are other models, or too good, I guess, but there are other models for relativism. The original Pyrrho was a relativist. Galileo, Einstein, Richard Feynman. These people had philosophical statements outside of physics, and with the natural philosophy as their backdrop, believing certain principles that they did talk. For example, Richard Feynman talks about what happens to beauty, the beauty of a flower when you're reducing it, conceptually to its components of chemicals. So there's plenty of relativistic models that we can use besides these ones from people that had ulterior motives and really just give it a bad name.